A vessel moves, taking its cargo here and there, choosing, losing, bruising in the quest to find somewhere, somewhere. Listening to its cargo's instruction, the vessel seeks an oasis of nothing, to contemplate avoiding destruction, or how to make its heart sing. Reflecting, correcting, projecting, then the vessel moves, feeling serene, feeling so serene.
Through the tavern doors you're strolling, from the wet and from the cold. Grab a friend and grab a chair, raise your mugs into the air. Warm your hearts with golden ale, stomp your boots in time with me. Sing along, the tune is fair, pitch right in and tell your tale. Through the tavern doors you stroll, in from wet and from the cold. Candles flicker on the beam, smoke and laughter thread between. Grab a friend and grab a chair, raise your mugs into the air. Fiddles scrape a merry line, tankards thud in steady time. The fire is stoked, the table's clean, the girls are nice but quick and keen. Travelers shake off road and rain, lean in close and call your name. Warm your hearts with golden ale, stomp your boots and raise a hail. Grab a book or find a bard, telling tales is not that hard. Sing along, the tune is clear, pitch right in so all can hear. Sing along, the tune is clear, pitch right in so all can hear.
Hello.
Hey there.
How's it going?
All right. All right. How are you?
Pretty good. Ready to get started?
Oh, am I? Yes. You want to read our introduction and we'll go from there?
Sounds good to me.
All right.
Well, welcome to Books and Bards, where unforgettable lines are transformed and given new lives. We take inspiration from well-known books and turn them into poetry prompts, then invite poets of all ages and abilities to see where the ideas lead. We explore how a single line, viewed through the different lenses of experience, can produce a variety of meter, metaphor, and meaning. Together, we'll discover how simple quotes from the page can unfold into poems all their own. This week's show is inspired by quotes from the book The Last Stand of the Tin Can Sailors by James D. Hornfisher.
Oh, it is? Oh.
It is.
That's what we're doing this week.
It is.
When did you read it?
When did I read it?
Yeah.
About a year and a half ago.
Oh. I picked it up, I think not very long after it first came out in paperback. So it was probably 2004 maybe. And I've had it sitting on my bookshelf in an honored position ever since.
Nice.
Though right now it's in a box in my ex-partner's storage shed in Point Cook, Victoria, Australia.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Well. I listened to the audiobook version. And I will preface this with saying, as much as I absolutely love history, military history, U.S. history, I love history, I will caveat that with I am no good with timelines and specifics. I normally understand general stories, despite absolutely loving it. So
Yeah.
you can be in charge of all of the specifics for tonight anyway.
Oh, all right. It's a good read, right? I mean, it's a fantastic read.
It was really good. I really, really enjoyed it. Horned Fisher does an amazing job not making it sound like a textbook.
Yeah.
So very, very good read.
You know, as Band of Brothers and the Pacific and the Eighth Air, what is it? The Eighth Air Force.
I think so, yeah.
You know, as those came out, every damn time I kept thinking, you know, they're really missing, you know, the naval war. And, you know, they really, like, if they did one book, it should be The Last Stand. It's an extraordinary book. It was an extraordinary naval battle for all sorts of reasons. And it really encapsulates everything about naval warfare that you would ever want to encapsulate in like a series on naval warfare. And when I saw Greyhound came out on Apple TV Plus with Tom Hanks in it, I was kind of really unhappy that they focused on that aspect of the war. So much of American World War II history is focused on Europe and the Atlantic and so forth, when they really, you know, I shouldn't say this on a show dedicated to Independence Day, but, you know, the Americans played a fairly minor role in the war in Europe, whereas they literally were the major force in the war in the Pacific. And I mean, the Russians won World War II in Europe, and you know, the U.S. played sort of a threatening role mostly until, you know, D-Day, and even then, all they did was tie up, you know, like about 88 German divisions in Western Europe that could have been leveraged to defeat Stalin and the Soviets. And you know, largely the Americans building up in England, you know, that prevented the transfer of those 90 or so German divisions to the east. And but I mean, in terms of the actual fighting and dying and land taking, it was really the Russians that, I mean, people don't realize that Europe lost, I mean, estimates are like 25 to 50 million people. And so, you know, the war in Europe raged for half a decade before the US even got involved. And by then it was already decided. Well, it was decided primarily because the Germans had to tie up, you know, 90-ish divisions in France, basically. But but the war in the Pacific was one, you know, almost well, I don't want to discount, you know, England and English colonies and, you know, Australia and so forth. But I mean, the major force in the Pacific Ocean and, you know, all of the island hopping and so forth that literally drove the Japanese all the way back to the mainland was the United States. And so there really should be more focus on the war in the Pacific. And so The Last Stand, you know, really, I think is one of those epic histories of an absolutely epic naval battle. And, you know, it took place in the Pacific, and it's got every aspect of history and naval warfare and also the island, you know, the island hopping that you could possibly want in a story. And it's also, I think, a great American tale, because it ended up pitting vastly inferior American naval forces against a vastly superior Japanese force. and the Americans drove them back and saved the landing in the Philippines. I mean, the Japanese were literally on the verge of completely disrupting the landing and winning
Mm-hmm.
the close-in naval battle. And they turned around and retreated because they were just beat by American grit and bravery.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think this tale is just epic to me. I read
It
the book. I read the
really
book
is.
twice. I mean, it's literally one of the only history books I've ever read twice. It's so good.
I need to order a physical copy because, like I said, I listened to the audiobook and I want to get a physical copy and read it and take notes this time because, like I said, as much as I thoroughly enjoyed the story and the telling of it, I want to actually like go through it and pay attention to dates and people and get a little bit more thorough understanding of it. I actually picked it up because somebody recommended it to me. I was attending the Defense Information School, and one of my instructors is a U.S. Navy chief, and he recommended it to me. And I am absolutely grateful that he did. It was an amazing read, and I'm going to read it again. So shout out to him for an awesome recommendation. But
well, so should we start off going through some prompts?
I think that sounds like a beautiful idea. It has been written that so much of life is preparation, so much is routine, and so much is retrospect that the purest essence of anyone's genius contracts itself to a precious few hours.
Yeah, so to me, this is about, that moment when preparation becomes action, and it's that's emphasized heavily, I think, in Hornfischer's writing. That moment when you suddenly determine or find out, whether or not you actually have the courage of your convictions, and whether you have the courage to take the actions that you've prepared for.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever been in that position where you could only be so prepared and you had to have the guts to actually take action based on that preparation?
Yeah, a few times. I think when I just, like one day I finished my final exams and drove took a bus to the airport and got on a plane and moved to Germany with nothing more than a suitcase and a bar to meet this person who was organizing my housing. And I remember thinking, what am I doing? But it wasn't like, I was happy to sleep on the street for a few days if I had to.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, moving overseas for the first time all by myself was pretty, that took some courage. So, and I'm about to do it again, moving to India, I hope in a few weeks. And I'm not at all prepared, but I guess at this point, I know that I have the courage of my convictions now because I've done it before, but the first time was hard. How about you?
Oh yeah. I have I've definitely had to have that moment of I'm actually going to do this and have the courage and the guts to go through it. And not to go into details, but you can only be so prepared for certain things, and sometimes you get up the guts and you do it, and then you look back and go, oh my, I missed a couple things, I could have been more prepared, or and so you know better for next time, and depending on what it is, you hope there isn't a next time.
Oh yeah, exactly.
So yes, I've absolutely had to go through that, and it can be very, very unpleasant. It can also be very, very rewarding depending on which situation you're in and how you look at it. But I think regardless of the situation, it can be very character building and educational.
Yeah.
So,
well, that leads us to anxieties. And prompt 2 is anxieties, wrote Alfred Thayer Mahan, or is it Thayer Mahan, are the test and penalty of greatness.
Anxiety, test, and penalty of greatness. That's a good one. What do you think about that?
Yeah. I mean, I think I've heard people characterize courage not as, you know, this, well, as courage of, you know, like being in fear but doing things anyway. And I think that's, you know, what this prompt points toward. Though in Hornfisher's book, I think it also points to the burden of responsibility as well.
Absolutely.
This is one that I think of, you know, when I see greatness, I think of Halsey, who blundered pretty heavily at Lady Gulf. It ended up being sort of a strategic win for the United States, but only because of the last stand of the tin can sailors on the, you know, on the beachhead, really. And and I think of, so I have this, I think, you know, Halsey was revered, and he didn't really kind of get punished for his, I would call it dereliction of duty, but because he basically, you know, just luckily ended up wiping out the rest of the Japanese fleet. But he was definitely drawn off by a decoy force, and he never should have left his screening position, and he should never have left a landing party unprotected. But, you know, it was Halsey. He could literally walk into the Oval Office and take a dump on the president's desk, and people would pat him on the back.
Oh, wow.
So, you know, I mean, he was already, you know, considered an example of greatness, and that probably saved his career after Lady Gulf. But, you know, he never had any doubt. He never carried any fear. So I don't remember exactly where this prompt comes from in the book. But I mean, he was such a great admiral and commander that, you know, they gave him overall responsibility of completely protecting the entire landing. And so, well, they gave it to him. It's a long story, but it went to him because he was actually the commander of Third Fleet at the time. It was a split command. He commanded Third Fleet part-time, and Spruance commanded it the other part-time, and it just so happened that he was in command of Third Fleet at the time. Spruance never would have pursued the Northern Force. But, you know, Spruance was not really considered as great as Halsey. So anyway, I think of this greatness in this prompt as maybe referring to Halsey. But
yeah,
anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think I'm trying to think. No, I don't remember exactly where in the book this particular quote comes from either, and what's exactly happening, but I can definitely attest to the fact that anxiety, the greater the responsibility, the harder the decision, any rate, the higher the anxiety. And for anybody who deals with anxiety, it is a test and a penalty. It's not something that anybody would consider comfortable. And so when they say it's a test and a penalty of greatness, the test is, can you think clearly under the anxiety and the stress to make a decision? And then the penalty is just the mental and emotional and sometimes physical toll of the weight of that anxiety.
Yeah.
And what you're required to do. And while I have never been in a situation that like what's described in this book, I think that's absolutely true. And the people who went through that absolutely deserve to be remembered.
Yeah.
Because of it. It's an amazing testament to the willingness that service members have to do what needs to be done. So
yeah. Next.
On the sea, there is no place to anchor a memorial flagpole or headstone. It is a vanishing graveyard.
Yeah.
Indeed,
Nice.
it is.
And we had,
but I think it's
one poem that wrote to this prompt, right?
We do, yes.
Yeah.
I actually really like this quote, and I like the picture it paints because it just the very essence of the sea or the ocean, and the lack of ability to place headstones or flagpoles. I think it makes it a massive equalizer. Like, I know most people have seen old cemeteries with massive statues or really small ones or just barely enough headstone to put a name on. Like, it's such a wide variety and difference in those I can't think of the word. Anyway, the memory, right, and what's put into them, that I think people lost to the water like that. It's an equalizer. It just says the ocean, it is no respecter of persons. If you die there, it's going to take you to wherever it takes you, and that's it. But it also is, I think because of that, I think I probably have a lot deeper respect for people who end that way or go that direction, because it's it's sort of that I'm going to go back to where the earth can use me the way it needs to. And I think I appreciate that about the ocean and the way it handles death with that lack of differentiating between people. If that makes any sense. It makes sense in my head. I don't know if it came out making sense, but
so when I first read this, it reminded me of when I was younger, having visited Arlington, and you know, you see all of the graves of, you know, soldiers, and I'm sure there's some naval personnel buried there, but you know, it's largely soldiers, and you know, literally tens of thousands of sailors were, you know, just buried at sea, or you know, went down with ships at sea. There's, you know, there are memorials to them as a group. You know, for example, you know, there's like the Arizona Memorial in Honolulu, in Hawaii, you know, that commemorates those lost at Pearl Harbor, for example. And there's memorials to sailors, but they're you know, mass markers. They're not individual markers. And I tend to think that, you know, the naval battles, the naval war in World War II is somewhat overlooked because we don't have those visible markers of all of the sailors that were lost at sea. That there's a notable exception, and that is sort of an organizational one. There are a lot of Marines who are buried, like in Arlington and so forth. And, you know, for those kind of history students or American war history students will know that the Marines are actually part of the Navy. And so, there's Marines that are buried, but, the vast majority of sailors lost in World War II were simply buried at sea or died in the ocean, and there's no individual markers for them. So, yeah, I think that's maybe part of the reason they're not in our collective consciousness, because we don't really have, places where we actually commemorate them on an individual scale. And I think this prompt kind of pays homage to their memory, not as individuals, but, sort of explaining why. So.
Yeah,
all right.
Absolutely. I can absolutely see that.
Prompt 4. All right. The Roberts had no way out but through this enemy cruiser. There thus remained only the duty to engage it. No one shirked from that duty. So, in retrospect, this is one of those prompts that sort of really only makes sense if you actually read the book, or at least if you, know some of the details. So, the U.S. had to reinvade the Philippines because even though it was a strategic, it was critical to the U.S.'s ability to wage war in Southeast Asia. The U.S. didn't do much to fortify it before the war began. And MacArthur, who was there and had overall command of the Philippines before the war, he was, stuck against dwindling or meager resources allocated to him, but he also didn't do much of a job to kind of lobby for them. And so sort of Hornfisher makes the point that it was sort of the government/military's problem as well as MacArthur's problem. But, he had to flee the Philippines after the Japanese invaded it, and drove the Americans out. MacArthur had to get on a PT boat and leave, I think it was Bataan, and ended up at Roberts Airfield near Darwin, Australia, and then by plane, train, and automobile made his way to Melbourne, which is really where the Americans' offensive war in the Pacific started. And so he eventually, had to. He famously said, "I shall return," and he did in 1944. And the whole Leyte Gulf battle was the reinvasion of the Philippines by MacArthur, Operation Musketeer. And so there was sort of this small naval force doing the landing and sort of having a small force near the landing beaches, full of more minor kind of hardware. And that was 7th Fleet. And then Halsey's 3rd Fleet was sort of the perimeter, guarding the perimeter against any major Japanese counterattack, which they knew would happen. And the Japanese sent 3 forces, including this northern force that was a decoy, and that drew Halsey and his carriers away to go after this big northern force with all of the big Japanese carriers. Meanwhile, 2 other Japanese forces headed for the beachheads. A center force that sailed out of Borneo and came in from the west. Initially, Halsey encountered them and turned them around. It was commanded by Admiral Kurita. He got driven back. He started to retreat, and so then Halsey turned his attention to this northern force and then committed the entire 3rd Fleet to go after this decoy northern force. And Kurita immediately turned around and attacked the beachheads and went after this much smaller naval force. And so you had this situation with literally the Yamato was one of the battleships, the biggest battleship ever constructed. And, just huge, like battleships and cruisers going against this small landing naval force, which consisted of minor hardware. And the Roberts was one of these minor hardwares. It wasn't even a destroyer. It was a destroyer escort. Destroyer escort's job in life is to put them between destroyers and torpedoes, basically. They have almost no protection. And so this massive force ended up going, hitting the beachhead. And the Roberts was faced head on with a cruiser, which is probably like 5 or 10 times their size. And this quote is about the Roberts. They had no way out. They were trapped by this cruiser. And I mean, if you've ever seen a cruiser, they're just massive. And these destroyer escorts are like the little pieces on the game Battleship. They're these tiny little things with no firepower, no nothing. But the Roberts just had no choice, and it went head on against this cruiser. And it was commanded by, I forget his name now. It was commanded, I'm forgetting his name. It was Copeland. He was a lieutenant commander. I mean, not even like a vice admiral. I mean, these are commanded by like lieutenants, basically. The Roberts attacked this cruiser as if it was a battleship, and it's pretty clear that the commander of the Japanese cruiser thought that they were up against at least a destroyer, but possibly a cruiser, because it was so aggressive. And the cruiser turned and ran. And I think that's the whole. They called destroyers and destroyer escorts tin cans because that's what they were. But that's like the entire story in a nutshell. And so this quote makes no sense if you didn't read the book. But this is about kind of a David and Goliath kind of a story of, David being trapped by Goliath and David just going after Goliath as if he's a Goliath equal, and Goliath turning and running. So this is about duty, and they had no chance of living through this encounter. The Roberts, they were basically just sacrificing themselves, almost like a destroyer escort acting as a kamikaze. And so this is about duty in light of impossible odds, and it's about sacrifice. So I don't think anybody wrote to this because I don't think any of our poets read the book. But to me, this is the one that I would have written against, because it's an absolutely brilliant story of courage and duty. So
I think if you wanted it to have a direct correlation, you need to read the book to understand this. But I think, especially since this particular podcast is about turning these things into poetry, I think it wouldn't be hard to relate to this. On the, I might not be facing off a cruiser at sea, but I definitely have struggles in my life. And I think this particular quote just talks to that by itself. There isn't a way around some things. You have to go straight through them. It reminds me of the stupid children's song. What is it? Can't go over it, can't go under it, gotta go through it, or something. Anyway. And so it's just about the sailors, the men on this escort, and acknowledging that they didn't have a choice. And they just did what needed to be done, despite the fact that the odds of them surviving were so small. And just sticking to it despite that. I think that in and of itself is courage. We did what needed to be done, even though the fear and the anxiety was so high, even though the odds of not succeeding were so high. We did what we needed to. And you don't have to necessarily go to war to understand that part of it. To get the specifics of the Roberts and that cruiser, you would need to read the book or have a general understanding of this particular engagement. But I think for poets and for most people, they're going to understand I've got this absolutely impossible task or challenge in front of me, and I don't have any other option but to go straight through it and to deal with it. And which is why I like it so much. It's such a good quote.
Yeah.
But no, absolutely. Great.
Yeah, I think if you just Googled like Last Stand of the Tin Can Sailors Roberts, you would quickly, I think, find out, just what a David and Goliath kind of a mismatch this was, and it would, it would maybe immediately give the sense of the scope of this quote. I mean, destroyer escorts had a staff of about 200 personnel. Cruisers had the Japanese cruisers at that point in the war had probably 900 men. They were literally twice as long as a cruiser could literally have just rammed into the side of the Roberts and split it in half and set it under the ocean in a matter of seconds. I mean, they're just the size mismatch is just that big. I wish maybe we should have added a little footnote here. So anyway, quote 5.
Yes, actually, hold on. I did a quick search, because of how important that particular battle was with the Roberts. I did a quick search of how many of the crew survived that particular encounter. If you're interested.
Yeah, please.
So very quick search. It says about 120 men off of the Samuel B. Roberts survived.
Yeah, that's crew. About two-thirds of the crew, probably.
Yeah. The 120 survivors, many of them wounded, had only 2 rafts and 2 floater nets to cling to until rescue came, and that was approximately 50 hours later. And apparently the last known survivor passed away in March of 2022.
As I recall, a fair number of them, well, some of them anyway, were in the water and killed by sharks. I think that was the section book where
it is.
It was grim. But they did their duty. They didn't shirk from it. And
no, not at all.
Yeah. And they were literally in the water for 2 days afterwards.
Yeah.
I mean, the aftermath was just a absolute chaos. It took them days just to find, most of the survivors. So, All right, 5.
Yes. On the cusp of a smashing victory, a commander must keep his nerve or fail altogether.
Yeah. This reminds me of who was the author that wrote the sort of the definitive history of Wake Island, where the Americans were literally winning when they surrendered. I mean, they were overwhelmingly winning against the Japanese invasion, and they surrendered. And to me, that's like the best historical case of an American commander not keeping their nerve and subsequently failing. I don't know if you read. I think it was just called Wake, or maybe it was called Wake Island, but it's kind of the definitive history of Wake Island. And the Americans were literally killing and pushing the Japanese off of the island when I don't think it was a military commander. I think it was sort of like the governor general or something of Wake Island ended up surrendering to a force that was literally defeated. And
wow.
Yeah, I think you need to keep your nerve. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Carita was at Lady at Lady. It was Carita who was literally on the verge of smashing the invasion force and the invasion force naval hardware when he decided that he was actually up against cruisers and destroyers rather than destroyers and destroyer escorts. And he thought he was up against, like full-size aircraft carriers, not what are called CVEs or escort carriers. That the landing force had 18 escort carriers, which were basically old, I think, merchant ships that were converted into these small little aircraft carriers that were only used for supporting landings. And Carita thought he was up against a vastly superior set of aircraft carriers, because part of the story is that the naval airmen fighting off of these carrier escorts were fighting so strongly and so audaciously that he thought he was up against just like a dozen full-sized aircraft carriers like Enterprise, which was with Halsey sailing north. So Carita absolutely was on the verge of total annihilation of the landing force when he retreated. So he was more than on the cusp. He was literally smashing the invasion, and he failed. So yeah, I think that's a great quote. All right. Prompt 6. Like most veterans, they would continue their lives saying that the truest heroes were the men who did not come back. And we had a poem that definitely wrote to that.
Absolutely.
It's a common sentiment against that's a common sentiment amongst veterans that I know of anyway. All of the veterans I've ever had conversations with. And that's across all of the branches of the services, right? So airmen, soldiers, naval, seamen, etc. So
yeah,
all right,
absolutely.
Shall we
yes we shall. Do you want to read first?
If you would like. Would you like
Sure.
me to?
Yeah.
All right, I have pasted the link. All right. This is Invisible Cemeteries by Pac-Man. The chart room was dark except for the red glow of a compass lamp. An old sailor stood watch alone, long after the war had ended, long after the ships had become museums, and long after the names of most battles had faded into the quiet archives of history. The sea outside was calm. He looked across the black water and thought of the men who never came back. On land, the dead are given geography. A stone bears a name, a flagpole marks a sacrifice. Flowers return each spring to remind the living where memory resides. But the ocean keeps no such appointments. The destroyers that vanished beneath shellfire, the carriers broken by flame, the sailors who slipped beneath the waves, they left no address behind. The sea accepted them all with the same indifferent horizon. For a moment, he wondered whether remembrance itself was temporary. Every generation loses a little more. Photographs yellow, letters crumble. Stories become footnotes. The faces once loved by mothers and wives grow distant even in family memory. Yet something remained. The ocean was not a cemetery because it held graves. It was a cemetery because it held absence. Every wave carried the weight of unfinished conversations, of birthdays never celebrated, fathers never met by their children, old men who would never sit upon porches and tell stories of storms survived. The sailor removed his cap. He understood then that monuments are built less for the dead than for the living who fear forgetting. The men beneath those waters needed no marble. Their lives had already entered eternity through sacrifice. It was the living who required markers, anchors against the current of time. The sea offered none. It erased coordinates, swallowed wreckage, and smoothed every scar upon its surface. Yet perhaps that was the final lesson. The ocean asks memory to be carried, not by stone, but by conscience. And as long as someone stands watch, gazing across the empty horizon and wondering who failed to return, the vanished graveyard is not entirely lost. End poem. Mm-hmm.
Pac-Man does an incredible job just transporting his readers through his imagery. The sense of, I guess, calm but lonely, I guess is how I would describe this. Is so I don't know, it's intense. It's very almost tangible. Like, he does such a good job. I think the open imagery does a great job setting the tone for the whole poem. And the fourth stanza, it says, on land the dead are given geography, a stone bears a name, a flagpole marks a sacrifice. And then it keeps on to the next one. It says, but the ocean keeps no such appointments. The destroyers that vanish beneath shell fire, the carriers broken by flame, the sailors who slipped beneath the waves, they left no address behind. He does such a good job. Leaving that sort of that lonely feeling through, I think when I say the whole poem, like, he does a very good job with this piece.
That next stanza, the sea accepted them all with the same indifferent horizon, to me, like anybody that's ever kind of been, to the beach and just like looked out over the vastness of the ocean, you have this incredibly small feeling, compared to the size of the ocean. And that stanza just sort of, to me, speaks to the minuscule size of each of the dead who are buried at sea relative to just the ocean is just this massive graveyard, and even if you filled it with like 100 million dead, they would still be just this tiny fraction of the size of the ocean. And so I think that stanza, to me, just captures the vastness of the ocean relative to sort of this minuscule sailor or sailors who were buried at sea. And to me, that's where that loneliness really kind of comes to life in the poem. And yet, he also in this poem is arguing that, what the dead represent, what they did was, in a sense, as vast as the ocean in terms of their dedication and their courage and their sacrifice. So I think that kind of came through really strongly. So I like that kind of sense of size. I also really like the craft here. I mean, this is just an extraordinarily well written poem, craft wise. It's just stunning.
Yeah, it is. It's absolutely stunning.
And I like the ending, that like, as long as someone stands watch,
yeah.
The vanished graveyard is not actually, entirely lost. So, that sense of, as long as someone's standing watch, these sailors are remembered.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Somebody has to keep an eye, or somebody has to stand watch, or you run the risk of generations forgetting what happened. And that's the sad part about it.
And it's easier to forget, I think, sailors, because, again, there are no landmarks, there's no headstones in graveyards on land. It's, they're buried beneath the waves. So
yeah,
I think we have to continue to stand watch.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Let me just at this point, many years ago, one of my favorite World War II histories is called "And If I Perish," and it's actually about the women who served in the United States Armed Forces during World War II. And so I don't want to just limit this to men, because many women were buried at sea. I'm aware of a U.S. hospital ship staffed pretty much entirely by wax. Is it wax, or what do they call them in the graves? I don't know. The
I'm
women.
not sure.
So there was a hospital ship, for example, off of Italy, that was attacked by, I think, the Germans, and many of the nurses on board were lost at sea. So, women fought in World War II as well, and more than a few were also buried at sea. So, let me just give a shout out to the commitment and dedication and service and sacrifice and courage of the women who, also fought against the forces of evil and are also buried not only in some of our cemeteries, but also buried at sea. So, but I don't know if I don't know if that was true at the Battle of Lady Gulf, but definitely, many women were also buried at sea. So, all right, we gave this a gold medal, and
We did.
Fantastic write.
It really is a fantastic write, with a lot of emotions carried through the whole thing, and did a very, very good job with that. All right. So next, I believe, is Fish Bait by... Yes, I'm going to read this one. Fish Bait by Jody Melton.
I've posted the link, so read away.
Fish Bait by Jody Melton. The sea keeps no cemetery. No iron gate rusting in the fog. No marble saints with blind white eyes. No rows of names carved deep enough to resist the hunger of time. Out there, death leaves no forwarding address. A man slips beneath the waves, and the ocean receives him, like a mouth swallowing a secret. The waves close over them all, with the same indifferent shrug. No one returns to visit. No flowers wilt in remembrance. No child traces his father's name with trembling fingertips. Only water. Only miles and miles of indifferent blue. The gulls circle overhead, not as mourners, but as scavengers waiting their turn. Beneath the surface, a darker congregation gathers, cold-eyed things with mouths full of ancient appetites. They know nothing of rank, or medals, or wedding rings. To them, every sailor is simply meat. Fish bait. The captain, the deckhand, the stowaway, the boy dreaming of distant shores. The sea strips them all alike. Flesh becomes feast. Bone becomes reef. Memory becomes sediment settling softly into blackness. And somewhere below, where sunlight dies before it arrives, the dead drift nameless among currents older than history itself. No flagpole can be anchored there. No headstone can stand. The ocean rejects every monument man attempts to build. It wants only surrender, only silence, only the slow dismantling of everything we believed permanent. Perhaps that is why sailors fear it, not because it kills, but because it erases. A grave on land says, someone was here. A grave at sea says nothing at all. Just waves rolling endlessly onward, while beneath them 1,000 forgotten souls feed the dark machinery of the deep, and become one final offering to the endless mouth waiting below. End poem.
Same prompt.
Yes. Same massive impact. Well, I guess not exactly the same, but still massive impact on that one.
Mm-hmm.
A man slips beneath the waves, and the ocean receives him like a mouth swallowing a secret. He's given the ocean a personality almost. It's just
It's anthropomorphic, right? Almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was it's a dark image, but it's my favorite image of this entire poem. It just immediately leapt out to me like a mouth swallowing a secret. Just and also that flesh becomes feast, bone becomes reef, which I think is a the bone becomes reef is really good. Calcium being important in both bones and reef, but also with reefs slowly dissolving, you also get that sense of bone dissolving as well. So I wrote in my comment harsh but true, especially the flesh becomes feast, but it's the ocean here being kind of human-like, with a mouth swallowing secrets, the flesh becomes feast is also kind of along the same vein there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think the end is sort of right. The beginning is just an acknowledgement of facts. I mean, I think the whole thing is just an acknowledgement of fact, but the darkest part is the end. It's like they're just they're fish bait, all of them. No rank, no anything. It's just, I think, like we talked about earlier, it's just the sea is the great equalizer. There's nothing to differentiate one from the other. They all go to the same spot and they all get the same treatment at that point.
I also
and
like,
just hope that somebody remembers them.
yeah. I also liked the stanza of, where of the sea stripping away, rank and metals, wedding ring. I thought that was also a really strong piece. Reminding us that, no matter what we achieve, or, no matter what our status in life, they're temporary and fleeting, and afterwards we're all kind of judged the same. We all end up in the same place, and so it kind of spoke to me around kind of the transient nature of achievement and and status and so forth. So in the end, we're all just fish bait.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I guess at this point, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? Difference here between, being buried, in a grave with a marker versus maybe being buried at sea without a marker.
Yeah. So I guess,
like, let me ask it more directly: burial or cremation?
Honestly, I'd much rather be cremated and scattered at sea, personally. And for more than one reason. I have never liked viewings, personally. The person you're looking at isn't there anymore anyway. It's just a shell. And you know what? The caskets are counterproductive. They've got too many chemicals. They're not productive to the soil. And so it doesn't allow the earth to use what it needs. It's, I guess you could say it's more damaging than not. The only part that makes it better is it makes us feel better. The person in the ground doesn't care anymore. It's for the people who are living, and I think there are far better ways to have a memorial of somebody you miss than to take up space. And that is absolutely a personal opinion. Nothing against people who want that. Nothing against people who want that for their family. But I think out to sea is a much better use of space, of resources, of allowing the earth to claim what it needs. So.
Yeah. I guess I've recently done a 180 on that. So I'm so I'm with you there. I mean, I kind of was very much in the burial kind of a mode for all of my life, and in the last few months that's done a complete 180. So now I'm entrenched in wanting to be cremated and have my ashes spread at sea. So but my father is buried, and right next to him, the plot next to him, is where my mother wants to be buried. And so more power to them. I totally get that. And, but, yeah, I guess I've just recently decided to go the other direction. So,
Yeah.
and I'm comfortable with not having any kind of a physical like gravestone to be remembered by. I think I'd rather people go to the ocean and sit on the sand and look out over the waves and kind of remember me that way. So, great right here, Jody, as always.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Jody does a fantastic job with his rights. And I think he did a great job addressing the prompt, as well as the book itself. And
Yeah.
so it's a great poem. It definitely deserved the silver medal we gave it. So.
Yeah. Well, I know you just read, but next up is This Veteran by Ima Rima, and I kind of feel like it should have a woman's voice. What do you think?
I can do that. That's fine. This Veteran by Ima Rima. This veteran returned from war, badly wounded but still alive, who I knew had helped many more escape from threat and to survive. This veteran from wounds would heal, but many wounds stayed raw inside, and which forever he would feel, for comrades of his who had died. This veteran, I know, does not like to talk of war times he had, but I know that he cares a lot about his service. That's my dad. When asked, this veteran will tell, truest heroes are those who fell. End poem.
So this one hit all the feels for me. So yeah, I liked. We all love an Ima Rima sonnet, to be sure, but this one is, I think it just nails it. So I just like how sweet and heartfelt it is. I mean, that was my first reaction was just how sweet it is. And you can really hear the voice of a daughter whose father had served, and there's just this really brilliantly written adoration, I think, and respect for and understanding for a father who served and saw way too much, way too many wounded, and way too many who had died to be able to talk about it. But the daughter's voice of understanding and sweetness toward the dad, I think, is just so strong in this. And it really it nails that prompt really well as well, right?
It really does. It really does. I said this in my comment on the website, but I love how very personal this can be, but I also love its ability to connect to literally anybody who has served or who has family who has served. And it makes it very relatable. And I think that's part of what makes it such an emotional piece.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the simplicity of it too. I think as poets, we tend to get caught up in the poetry-esqueness of words and trying to make them more pretty or more poetic, I guess. But I like the very simple approach to this, and I think it worked really, really well. She didn't overdo it, and I think that can be a really hard balance to find sometimes. So very, very well done. Very good piece.
Very literal, right? But I also want to just point out just such a strong rhyming scheme here as well. I mean, it's perfect rhyming as well, which Ima Rima is very good at with her sonnets. So a few years before I moved to Australia, so the late 2000s, so 2006 or so until about 2010, I worked from home from Starbucks quite a bit. And there was a group of older gentlemen who would come in literally every day, drink coffee and sit together and just talk. They were retirees. And one who's still a dear mate of mine, George, was semi-retired. But the other two were well beyond retirement. And it turned out, so I would work from Starbucks. And so I very quickly got to know them. And suddenly I was working about half time and spending the other half of my time just sitting and talking to this group of guys. And two of them were lifelong friends since childhood. And they had both served in the Navy together. And they were World War II veterans, and they were naval veterans. And, they were in their early 80s at that point, or mid 80s at that point. And so they had been really young when they joined the Navy in like 1942 or 43. And they would talk about, when they first enlisted and, they were going through, I don't even know what's the naval equivalent of boot camp.
I think they call it boot camp.
I call it boot camp. And they would talk about like their early training cruises, because they did some training cruises, but they wouldn't talk about anything after that. I mean, they wouldn't even talk about their returning home and becoming like de-enlisted or whatever. They would tell stories that had a real ending date. And they both passed away a few years after I moved to Australia, so I never got to talk to them again. But George and I talk about them pretty regularly, and kind of recount some of their stories. And yeah, I just they must have been mid 80s. And anyway, so that sense of whatever they saw, they were just keeping that to themselves.
Absolutely.
Just not wanting to or not able to talk about it.
Yeah, I know people who are like that. I've had a friend who been deployed, saw a lot of things, and he had a really hard time with it.
Yeah.
I have a grandfather who had the same problem, who unfortunately solved his problems with a bottle. And back then, PTSD wasn't as
recognized or treated.
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. So no, I appreciate the poem and the sentiment of the poem. So
yeah, most of the veterans I know who served and fought, most of them were Vietnam veterans, I guess I would say. Some from more recent deployments and actions and wars and so forth, but the majority were Vietnam veterans. And that was I think the war, the aftermath of that war, when the military started to realize that, they really needed to do a lot more to support returnees, veterans. It seemed anyway like, there was much more recognition in, starting in the late 70s and early 80s. But I wrote a poem about a childhood friend of mine who, not long after coming back from Vietnam, killed himself in his garage, and there was just no support for veterans in the mid 70s. Now, hopefully, there's a lot more, but I think it's still insufficient. I think the not talking about it doesn't really work, on average. So,
No.
Having, support and people they can talk to about it, fellow veterans, veterans groups and so forth. They need a safe space where they can talk about it, I think, to others who have been through it. And, I didn't serve, so I have zero, understanding of any of it. But I know that it, the consequences, war kills both on the battlefield and off the battlefield. And so I don't think not talking about it is a good kind of way to go about that. And so I liked how this poem captured that sense of, not being able to talk about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely it did. On to the next one.
Well, so this one, as well as the next one, in my mind, were tied for a bronze, and so has happened so often in our contests, and so
Yeah.
as far
And
as
once again, we are
coin toss.
yeah. And once again, we can't award 2 bronzes. We had to pick one. So
yeah, I really wish there was an option for 2 bronzes, but this was a fantastic poem. It hit all the feels, and I'm very happy that we were able to give it a bronze medal.
Yeah, absolutely. Very well deserved bronze medal. It's your turn to read.
It is indeed. So I need to post the link. So this was our other bronze medal winner that this week the coin toss went the other way, but this is a fantastic poem called "The Soldier Who Told the Truth" by Vazago. When the soldier put down the gun, the man finally spoke. Military police. MP. Is Johansson here? Yes. A bit late, a bit blurred, but yes. Orders. No explanation. Get your gear. You're coming with us. Laughter died as I ran up the stairs. Silence followed me out the door. A new kind of silence. 2 hours in the car, 2 hours of thoughts. Did someone snitch? Did they see me? Am I headed for the cell or the range? At the base, the major was waiting. Back straight, eyes steady. He looked at me and said, "So, you don't want to join the exercise?" I took a breath. I knew I had to say it as it was. I'm a drug addict, and I don't dare keep a weapon in my home. I've had the barrel in my mouth, around in the chamber, finger on the trigger. Silence, the heavy kind. He just looked at me. I kept going. I can't go into the field now. I'm crashing from amphetamines, and I don't have enough left to survive 2 weeks in the woods. His face was stone, but his eyes, they weren't judging, just dead serious. I'll mark you as unfit for duty, he said finally. But that AG3, you have to take it home. My pulse spiked. Everything in me screamed no. I shook my head. I'm not touching that weapon again. Silence again, a second that lasted too long. A civilian from the depot stepped in, took the rifle from my hands, and gave me a receipt. My whole body sank. Thanks, man, I said. And to the major, thanks for helping. Idiot, I thought. Then I stood up. You picked me up, so you damn well drive me back. They didn't argue. They drove me to the station. Before I got out, one of them handed me a bill. Here, for your ticket. I took it, one less thing to worry about. But sitting there, alone on the platform, the tears came. I didn't know if it was relief, shame, loss, or all of it. The stripes I'd worn, gone. Everything I thought I was, gone with them. Only the man remained, and he cried. End poem. What do you think?
I think this is an extremely personal poem.
Yeah.
And the tension is immediately noticeable. But I also appreciate that they didn't sugarcoat what was going on. They addressed it as what it is. And I like the very, I guess, the straightforward approach to this.
Mm-hmm. And did you see the tags at the end?
I did see that.
Yeah. Truth, addiction, soldier, military, confession, and honesty. And the author's note, sometimes the bravest act isn't to fight, but to admit you can't. Yep. This was the day I laid down my weapon and began to face myself, not with shame, but with truth. Not as a soldier, but as a man. So yeah, it reads to me as a very personal and honest and not so, well, yeah, confession of truth, I guess, is the way that I would say it. And to me, the entire, writing of the poem is an act of bravery. So I liked how brave the poem is.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very, I think, a confession, I guess, like this can be one of the hardest things to do. Mm-hmm. And he did it very well, very beautiful piece. He said that the tension is very obvious, as well as everything else. And very, very strong poetry here.
Yeah. Yep.
I think my favorite part of this, if you can have a favorite part of an experience like this,
right,
was, let's see, where is it? It's near the end. It says, sitting there alone on the platform, the tears came. I didn't know if it was relief, shame, loss, or all of it. The stripes I'd worn, gone. Everything I thought I was, gone with them. Only the man remained, and he cried. I love the nakedness, I guess, of this, is everything that defined the person or they thought had defined them has been stripped away, and they're just left with sort of a blank slate, if you can call it that. And I think it's a beautiful moment, I think, in somebody's life when they come to that realization. Excuse me.
Yeah, the intensity in the poem is real, and it's strong. It's and you know, it just sort of drips down the page as you read it, right? It's just intense. And
Absolutely.
I don't have the experience of, you know, of the level. Yeah, you know, this is clearly, you know, the next level kind of a situation that, you know, I've never been close to. So I don't have, you know, this level of experience, you know, in terms of, you know, the intensity, you know, the life's, you know, the tenuousness of this soldier's experience.
Yeah.
They're clearly in a really bad place, in a, you know, in kind of a really bad environment, you know, being around weapons, and, you know, being in the throes of addiction, and you know, also feeling just so run down and stripped down, and you know, they're right to, you know, they're right to, you know, refuse to take the weapon home.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
I've never had a barrel in my mouth, a round in the chamber, finger on the trigger. So, you know, I can't relate to the level of intensity, but I think many of us have been in the situation of just sort of being so done with something that it's severely affecting our mental health, and being unable to go
Absolutely.
on.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm pretty sure if I had been in that environment, you know, you know, having a weapon around would not have been in my would not have been good for me. And so, while I can't relate to the specifics, you know, and the intensity of this specific and situation, you know, which kind of takes that to the next level, you know, you can get it. You can at least identify with that general, you know, sense of being so done with something that it's affecting your mental health, and you know, maybe it's drugs, maybe it's drinking, maybe it's, you know, whatever. So you can kind of get the anguish there of that. I don't know if it was relief, shame, loss, or all of it. Everything was gone, you know, and everything I thought I was gone with them. So I think, you know, this poem is relatable to most people, even if they haven't been in that specific situation, or in such an intense situation. I thought he did a great job with this.
Absolutely. He did a very good job with it. So I agree. I've never been in that situation. I've never, not those specific situations anyway, but I think to acknowledge that you need help and to state it is huge, and it takes its own courage to be able to do that. So
yeah,
I applaud him that.
yeah, absolutely. This is courage and bravery at the highest level, I think.
Absolutely it is. So next up,
great job, Vizago. Really great job, Vizago.
Absolutely, very good job. Great write. Once again, wish we could have given out 2 bronzes, but
yeah.
Our next poem is by Miriam Kilmer, and it's called Anxieties, a Test of Metal.
Maybe a woman's voice, or is this
Sure.
the one? Is this one that you wanted me to read?
No, you can read the next one.
Okay. Good.
Anxieties, A Test of Metal by Miriam Kilmer. Anxieties, wrote Alfred Thayer Mahan, are the test and penalty of greatness. From The Last Stand of the Tin Can Sailors by James D. Hornfisher. Drying sheets blow on the line. Breezes shape them like sails at sea. Wind turns to rain. The sky a wet sheet falling, rendering all our sweat and labor useless. We run out, swift as yearling colts, unpinning linens, but too late. Everything soaked, including ourselves. One moment in the sun we had, a hope of freedom, of overalls and aprons nearly ready to wear. Instead, we cram wet sheets and underpants in laundry baskets. Our sense of purpose tested, yet not all is lost. I hear the radio announce, tomorrow may bring partly sunny skies. End poem.
Mhm.
What a letdown. Clothes almost dry and then pouring rain.
Yeah. So I think this may be somewhat the other end of the anxiety spectrum, maybe from the anxieties maybe faced by the sailors in Last Stand.
Yeah.
I also don't want to get into the habit of, comparing levels of anxiety because, anxiety of all different types and sorts, can be, very harmful. So,
Yes.
but I do sort of, I do like the comparison to, the sailing. So I thought, the dry sheets blowing on the line, with breezes shaping them like sails at sea was a really nice image that anyone can relate to. And then, sort of the weather changing and, rendering all of our sweat and labor useless. So I really liked that opening stanza a lot. Very image rich for me.
Absolutely. I think there are plenty of people today who will not ever experience the joys of trying to get clothes in off the line before rain comes. I did have a point in my childhood where I think my father was doing some renovations on the house. And so we didn't have a dryer for a while. And so he had put up a clothesline in the backyard. And so I absolutely remember running outside to get laundry off the line before it started to rain. And it was quite the experience. So I enjoyed this. I enjoyed the nostalgia of this, as well as the emotion that goes with it.
Yeah.
So
even for those of us with dryers, let me speak for my family and not try to generalize it to most of us or something, but even if you have a dryer, so you might be able to relate to this. I grew up with 3 brothers, so my parents had 4 kids, and we had a dryer, and my dad worked for Pacific Gas and Electric, so we got a sizable discount on our electricity usage. But with 4 kids and 2 parents, when it came time to do, linens, bed sheets and so forth, you would be using that dryer for like 48 hours straight, trying to get 6 sets of, bed sheets and so forth all dried. So we wouldn't do our clothes on the line very often, but we would typically do our bed sheets, on the clothesline, just because, they're big and bulky and they take a long time to dry. And there were so many sets. So I think, probably a lot of other people or at least some other people have that experience of at least doing, like sheets on a clothesline.
Yeah.
And so what this reminded me of, 'cause I grew up in Northern California. We didn't, like have sudden, thunderstorms rear up on us very often. But when we visited my father's parents in Southern Illinois, then there would be 8 of us all staying at my grandparents' house. And we would have to do all of our bed sheets and a fair bit of our clothes on the clothesline. And being Southern Illinois, we were subjected to random and sudden thunderstorms that would appear out of nowhere. We were also subjected to tornadoes that would kind of appear out of nowhere. And that kind of weather seemed to go together. The whole tornado weather. And so on probably about a dozen occasions, we had to run out and pull everything off of the clothesline, either because it was about to start pouring or because we were suddenly finding ourselves in a tornado watch. And so that really connected with me, because the last thing you want is your sheets on the clothesline when the wind picks up, whether a tornado touches or not. So that was a common occurrence for us when we were in Christopher, Illinois.
Absolutely.
So nicely done.
Yes, absolutely. Very nicely done.
Oh, and in the author's note, Miriam writes, that it was a memory from childhood, early 1960s, before we had a dryer, and that seems about right for the 1960s, probably. I think they were less common especially after the kind of gas crisis of the 70s, when kind of electricity costs kind of spiked. But I guess after that, there was also, kind of hyperinflation in the late 70s. So, but certainly by the 80s, we were running our dryer pretty much constantly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So nice, right, Miriam. Thank you for submitting that.
Yep, absolutely.
Right, now is
your turn.
All right, link is pasted. All right, this is Press On and Lock, Bloody Smiles by Lena61. Prompt from The Last Stand of the Tin Can Sailors is, anxieties are the test and penalty of greatness. Press on, press on, press on, let's take the hit. Take the hook and bait the bit. I take the beating, remember, my body has the scars, the imprint of it. Press on, let the motion land. There's colors in the mark, like devotion drew a hand. I guess there's art in the brunt, aesthetic in the blow. There's honesty in the fight, the climax of the flow. The jolt no longer small. I felt the lesson, hit the wall. They took her soul, and the number 3 is called. How much can one family unit take before they undo the mold? The measure unfolds, and the center shatters, breaks. Remember, child, the mantis said, the storm don't break us, it shakes us right out of our beds, earthquaking our minds and our heads. Oaks don't grow strong in gentle breeze. The deeper the pressure, the deeper the drive. The squeeze is the reason. the roots stay alive. The signal hides beneath the trees. Diamonds cook and cool below, under pressure, forced to glow. There's art within the brunt of the blow. There's honesty in the fight, a shining flow. Fracture line, spinning, my crease, my bend. Am I the best or phony foe? Bloody smiles. Don't try to sink my suds for your lack of fun. Fund my thickest bruise, but I won't keep up that ruse. Tell me there's trouble. My mind sinks into rubble. Knee deep, I'll find sticky teals and blues. The berry bumble, cause my mind can get into the crumble, 'cause my mind can get into the crumble. If I look down, I stumble. When I look up, things get distorted. Like imagine I'm high as kites. Up I go, a bird upon a grid-filled sky. Nosebleed on white bathroom tiles. Knocked out teeth, bloody smiles. Lock, recursion sequence. System still rocks, flash of shock. Press on, don't look. When time drops, climax. Tick, tock, watch goes off. The crooked woe, the final weary blow. That's the most authentic way to go. End poem. And the author's note says, this submission interprets anxiety as a system of pressure rather than a private feeling. Something tested through endurance, fractured through impact, and repeated through internal cycles. It moves from external strain to internal distortion to recursive collapse under sustained force. And I think that's actually a really good description.
I agree. That is a really good description. I like this piece. They did a really good job, I think, with creating, I guess, the tension with the right, without defining it per se. Let's see. So I like I have to admit, the way they've got it broken up and the sections are titled sort of. It took me a minute to get used to that the first time I read it. It threw me off a little bit. But in the first section or the first stanza, the deeper the pressure, the deeper the drive. The squeeze is the reason the roots stay alive. So they're using right, and it's using natural pressure to build this. Like diamonds cook and cool below.
Yeah.
Under pressure, forced to grow. Like these are actual like reasons that tension or pressure or anxiety, I guess, are good. There's a reason for it. And the way they've got this laid out and built, I guess imitates that. And it does a really good job of imitating that. What do you think?
So I think one of the strongest parts is the violence. There's violence threaded most of the way throughout, except for the final kind of section, the lock recursion sequence. So there's this violence scattered throughout. My body has the scars. There's colors in the mark, like devotion drew a hand. There's aesthetic in the blow, honesty in the fight, and the jolts. Oh no, wait. I felt the lesson hit the wall, and then in the bloody smiles section, fund my thickest bruise. I'll find sticky teals and blues. So, like the blue of a bruise. And, there's crumbling, and there's a nosebleed on the white bathroom tiles, knocked out teeth and bloody smiles. So I thought that was really strong. Imagery and also just threading of sort of the threading of violence through the poem, and that creates an extraordinary amount of tension. And I think I specifically, so it felt like it almost like induced an anxiety attack just in me just reading it. But that entire first section, though, to me reminds me of a manic episode that I observed in a friend of mine many years ago. It feels like this kind of manic recitation of related but slightly incoherent kind of little fragments. And so I thought that whole first section, Press On, did a really good job also of kind of turning that anxiety into maybe manic anxiety on steroids. So I thought that was just really great writing and great craft in showing, not telling, that kind of manic anxiety. So I thought that was good craft, and it's a really long section, and so the length of it, and so the number of kind of repetitions there of what I think is sort of a manic / anxiety attack, or is just so strong.
Yeah, absolutely.
I really like that line that you quoted, that diamonds cook and cool below.
Yes,
so strong.
It is. I'm sorry. I'm scanning the rest of it.
So it almost, it is, to me, really definitely just sort of making this creating this relationship between the violence or trauma or both of the poem with something very rooted in the ground, like the way that diamonds are created underground with with temperature, and temperature. So I just felt like that was fantastic line.
It really is.
And you can really feel the narrator being pushed to the fracture point.
Absolutely. This part, it says, up I go, a bird upon a grid-filled sky, nosebleed on white bathroom tiles, knocked out teeth, bloody smiles. Oh my gosh. So part of this is a couple of my kids are very prone to nosebleeds, and they get everywhere. They just make a massive mess.
Hmm.
But it's sort of the anxiety with that kind of, like, even though it's a nosebleed, and most of them aren't horrible, right? You can stop them and it's not bad, but like, just most people see that kind of mess, right? A small wound with a massive amount of blood, right? And
Yeah.
there's a certain amount of anxiety that comes with that. It's like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, it's gushing, make it stop. And so it's just, like I said, they did a great job with the anxiety and the emotion through the whole thing. But I think that particular section in and of itself carries a lot of anxiety, because most people are going to be familiar with those specific images. Like, they understand some of the other ones, but those are very human things to go through. And so I appreciated that section of it.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of grew up in the country. You know, we raised animals, we slaughtered animals, and you know, I grew up, you know, seeing blood, and you know, it's just sort of a kind of a natural part of you know, country life, having animals and you know, slaughtering them for food. It was kind of not until later in life that I realized that, you know, there's actually a lot of people that, you know, like, who faint at the sight of blood. And so, you know, for those who are not, you know, desensitized, you know, to it, you know, the sight of blood, a really heavy anxiety kind of forming or anxiety inducing event. And, you know, for a lot of people, you know, a nosebleed is one of the main ways that they ever see their own blood. And so I don't get anxiety from seeing blood. For a lot of people, you know, that is their experience. And so in the case of the poem, you know, I think, you know, the nosebleed is from violence, and you know, it's domestic abuse, or I suspect it's, you know, kind of the poem is really talking about domestic abuse, domestic violence. But even just somebody that, I don't know, was out in the sun and maybe overexerting themselves and suddenly they get a nosebleed, that can, I mean, I know people who literally faint at the sight of their own blood. So can be a real anxiety, especially for kids, you know, the first time they see themselves, or even the first many times they see themselves bleeding, like with a nosebleed. Yeah, people can really react strongly to that. So,
well, and with that being said, taking this back to the book that we pulled these prompts from, there's your trigger warning. It's a retelling of naval war history.
Yeah.
If you get squeamish, I realize there aren't any pictures in the book, but here's your trigger warning. It's not, they're not pretty descriptions, we'll put it that way. So anyway, I think they did a great job with the tension and the anxiety part of this. So
nicely done.
Yes, very nicely done.
All right, up next we have The Cargo by Lockdown Larks, and we have a sound cloud. So I'm hoping that Pam is listening in and can play our sound cloud for us.
A vessel moves, taking its cargo here and there, choosing, losing, bruising in the quest to find somewhere. cargo's instruction. The vessel seeks an oasis of nothing, to contemplate avoiding destruction, or how to make its heart sing. Reflecting, correcting, projecting, then the vessel moves, feeling serene, feeling so serene. They search in the ebb and flow, sometimes alone or in a crowd, trying to find something to know, learning from every storm cloud, surfing waves of right and wrong, rushing, brushing, crushing, hoping to hear another cargo song, that one song. But inside there is an ache, maybe a heartbreak. So the vessel must seek some refuge, a rest that they must take, a haven from life's deluge. In dreams, time may stand still as oceans of harmony come into view. Apparitions of aspirations refill, and the cargo is nearing a renewal. So the vessel moves, thrashing, crashing, smashing, still seeking somewhere in life's here and there.
What do you think?
Well, I think the audio is beautiful. Let's start with that. Let's see. I think this is an interesting. This is a very interesting take on the prompt, I think.
Yeah, I think it might be a little bit prompt adjacent, but
yeah. It was a pre-write, which is fine.
Yep.
I think the perspective is what caught me. It's and the whole thing is based on what the ship is carrying, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you take this in a very personal perspective, if the vessel is the person and then the cargo is whatever it is, it's emotion, it's problems, it's
so
people coming in and out.
Cargo is the mind, right? It's
Yeah.
so
And it's interesting. See,
the vessel is a body,
yeah,
moving, and it's taking its cargo here and there.
yeah.
And then the second stanza, listening to its cargo's instruction. So, the cargo is the brain, basically, I think. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, but I think it's more than just the brain, because it's if you seeks an oasis of nothing to contemplate avoiding destruction or how to make its heart sing. So sure, the brain, but it's more than that. This touches on avoiding destruction. We're avoiding anxiety, we're avoiding an emotional collision, we're avoiding maybe it's another person, and we're trying to find somewhere where we feel safe, how to make its heart sing, right?
Yep.
Where it can let go and be okay, reflecting, correcting, project, and then as it finds it feels serene, and then it goes on. So I think this is the brain, but I think it's more than that. It's
Well, it's a deeply psychological
yeah,
piece,
absolutely.
and so it's maybe it's troubled and searching for. I really like that line, the oasis of nothing.
Yeah.
An oasis is, that, a source of life, of water or whatever, but but yet it's not, right? Because it's an oasis of nothing, so there's nothing there. So it's like seeking an oasis, but finding that it isn't, there's nothing in the oasis.
Yeah.
And I think the search in the ebb and flow is, this psychological searching, of the cargo, sort of the mind kind of searching.
Yeah.
Sometimes a loner in a crowd, I think, is another really strong line. Trying to find something to know, learning from every storm cloud. So, looking for certainty, I guess, on this ocean, keeping with the metaphor, surfing waves of right and wrong, rushing, brushing, crushing, hoping to hear another cargo's song, that one song. So maybe trying to come up with, a new song to hear in their head.
Yeah.
And then but inside there's an ache, and the vessel has to find a refuge, a haven from life's deluge. So it's like looking for a safe haven for the ship. I thought it was a really strong metaphor from beginning to, all the way through. And then that final stanza, with the vessel still moving, thrashing, crashing, smashing, still seeking, somewhere in life's here and there. So that kind of the ups and downs and ebbs and flows of life, like they're still seeking, that haven.
Yeah,
So there's
absolutely.
also there's also an image on the poem, the quote by Sophocles: "A man, though wise, should never be ashamed of learning more, and must unbend his mind." So uh, it might also, in rather than being like a severely troubled mind, just a mind that is seeking new learnings about themselves, trying to unbend their mind, trying to sort of have a better and better understanding of their own internal psychological life. I think that might be a fairer reading, because it doesn't really, there's no like self-harm or anything like that in here. There's nothing really horribly out of place. There's choosing, losing, bruising, reflecting, correcting, projecting, rushing, brushing, crushing. These are not, particularly severe, say, symptoms of themselves internally, I guess. We all do these things: crashing, thrashing, smashing. So it may just be more of an internally trying to better understand how they respond to the ebbs and flows of life. So it's not to me, it's not a particularly dark poem. It's more of an introspective poem, I think. And that's why the music is also very kind of relaxing, not violent, right? Fairly reflective and relaxing, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But they did a good job, I think. So
yeah, I think it's a pretty poem.
it is pretty.
Maybe I'm way off here, I don't know, but to me it
feels like a meditation almost.
Yeah, exactly. It's soothing to me.
Yeah. And maybe the audio has something to do with that, but no, it does. It feels like a meditation and a calming of the mind and whatever anxiety is going on. So, which honestly, that's not bad. Some of us need that. So, but it is that sort of meditative feel is definitely, I would say, a stark contrast to the overall feel of the book. And most of the poems submitted to the to this particular
so I also just want to point out a little bit of craft work here. I think the the choosing, losing, bruising, the repetition, the recursion of the choosing, losing, bruising, reflecting, correcting, projecting, those are doing some really, I think, really strong work. When I first read it, and thinking about the ship and ocean kind of metaphor, those struck me as being feeling or sounding like waves gently slapping against the side of the boat. So I thought that was really strong craft work, and it definitely aided to me in the rhythmicity and the calmness, and rhythm of the poems. I thought those were really strong craft work.
Absolutely.
All right, shall we end it by thanking Lockdown Larks for such a wonderful poem? And
I think so, and thanking Pam for hanging out. So
yes, thank you, Pam.